Please be seated. The court is now in session. Today we will continue to hear the testimony of the witness Kung Kim, and the floor will be given to the lead co-lawyers for civil parties. You have 1 hour time allocation. Counsel for civil party, Mr. President, good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, everyone in and around the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Kung Kim. My name is Devani, the civil party lawyer for. Yesterday, you made some statements before this chamber, and today I'd like you to clarify some matters through my questions, and we thank you for your cooperation. And we will ask you questions regarding your written record of interview D166/74, as well as document IS-19/96. Let me go back a little bit, and the question is, in what year did you start working as a messenger? Response. Since I joined in 1974, and while I was in the battlefield, I was assigned as a messenger. Question: where was the location of that battlefield? Response: I worked as a messenger at the Prek Kadam location. Question: were you appointed as a messenger or did you volunteer? Response: at that time, I was appointed by the group chief. Question: in the performance of your job as a messenger, from whom to whom did you convey the messages, and what uniform were you wearing back then? Response: I wore black uniform with a car tire thongs. Messages were conveyed from the rear to the front battlefield, and also to carry the wounded from the battlefield to the offices and then to the rear. Question: as a messenger, did you carry a gun? Response: while I was working as a messenger, I was not alone. There were other messengers, and I was quite young. I did not carry a gun, but other people carried guns while we were working together as a team. Question: how old were you back then? Response: I cannot recall clearly, but I was around 15 years old. Question. As a messenger, did you work as a group, and how many members in that group? Response. There were messengers for various companies, battalions, or regiments. And then those messengers form as a squad between 3 to 5 messengers per squad. Question. Regarding the letters that you convey, where were you mostly sent, and did you have to wait to receive the letters and convey it back to its original places? Response. At that time, there were no letters. The instruction was to relay between the front and the back and the rear. Question. You stated that you work as a messenger in that division. My question is, did you convey the messages or letters to various destinations, if you can recall? Response. I was a messenger for the front battlefield, so the messages were to convey between the front battlefield to the rear. The front battlefields were at Anlong Kongam, Trapang Pri, for example, or at the Thom village. So we were within the barracks, the military barracks within those locations. Question. When you reached your destination with the letter that you conveyed, was there a signature to acknowledge the receipt of the document or the data, and did they give any letter for you to return? Response. At that time, there was no acknowledgement or signature of the letters, but the orders were to convey from the rear to the front battlefield, and then I conveyed the message back from the front battlefield to the rear. Question. Were the orders in the form of a written letter, or was it in a verbal form? Response. The orders were verbal. There was no written instruction or letter. It was conveyed verbally. President. Counsel for civil parties, you are reminded of the facts to be questioned before this chamber. What you questioned was the facts before 17 April 1975, and here we are questioning the witness regarding the evacuation phase, and you have already lost 10 minutes, so you have only 50 minutes remaining for your team. Please try to frame your questions accordingly based on the facts before this chamber at this stage of the proceeding. Counsel. Thank you, Mr. President. Question, Mr. Witness. Besides the duty as a messenger, did you perform any other duties during the regime of Democratic Cambodia? Response. Initially, when I joined, I was appointed as a messenger so I could get used to the conditions, and later on I myself engaged in the fight in the front battlefield. Thank you. Question. Yesterday you responded to various questions through the prosecution regarding the military structure and the evacuation of people. My question is, who actually inducted you to join the army? Response. At that time, at the rear base, people were recruited to join the military, both the young teenagers and the young men. Question. Were you provided with any military training? Response. When I became a sector soldier and I stationed at the Chiang Prey district for 1 month, and I received military training there. Thank you. Question. In what year were you promoted to become the unit chief? Response. I became the unit chief after the fall of Phnom Penh. So while I was in Phnom Penh after the fall, I was promoted. Thank you. Question. Can you describe a little bit further regarding the military structure in that regime? So it started from the unit or from the squad and it goes up. And as you was part of the military structure, you should be very familiar with such structure. Response. I was a unit chief or squad chief under the command of the platoon chief by the name of Pon. And platoon was under the control of the company. And the company was headed by Jim. As for the regiment or the division, I only knew the designated number, but I was not familiar with the command structure. Question. Did you know the names of the commanders of the battalion or the regiment or the brigade, and who actually led those military divisions or a structure? Response. In the division from the sector controlling the 3 provinces, Un was the division commander and Song was the regiment commander 53, and then there was battalion number 32. Question. Who was the commander of the special battalion? President, please witness, you need to wait until you see the red light on the microphone and the console. Response. In one regiment, there was one special battalion, but I did not know who actually was the commander of the battalion. And Chat and Song were the commanders of a regiment. Thank you. Question. Can you tell us regarding the center division? What was the designated number for that center division? Response. I did not know about the designated numbers of all center divisions. I only knew one, that is center division 310. Thank you. Question. Division 310, was it under any other divisions? Response. I do not have that knowledge, whether that Division 310 under any other divisions, as I was myself only familiar with the squad, platoon, and company levels. Question. Before the attack on Phnom Penh, was there a special arrangement for the first attack headquarters, second attack headquarters, for example? Response. During the fierce attack on Phnom Penh, I was not aware of such an arrangement, but I knew that the meeting was held in order to inform about the gathering of all forces for the final attack on Phnom Penh. Question. I'd like to ask you on another point regarding the disciplinary measures. What were the disciplinary measures within the military? Response. During that time that I worked as a soldier, everything was strict. We would not go anywhere freely. At the front battlefield, we focus on the attack, and at the rear, we stay at the barrack. So we did not go around freely. Response. What about if there was a violation of disciplinary measure? What would happen to such a soldier? Response. During the fighting in the battlefield at that time, there was no such issue because soldiers attacked in the front battlefield, and those behind the battlefields were ready themselves to assist or to replace other soldiers at the front battlefield. Thank you. Question. As a soldier and as a squad leader at the time, who would be the highest superior or commander of the military at the time? Response. As I said, I did not know much about the senior leadership of the military structure. I only heard of the division and the designated number of the division. As I said, I was only familiar with the company and the platoon level. Question. Now I move on to another point, that is the attack on Phnom Penh and the evacuation. Yesterday you testified before this chamber that prior to attack on Phnom Penh, you joined in the meeting regarding the plan for the attack on Phnom Penh. And my question is, who led that meeting? Response. The meeting was organized for the commanders from the platoon leaders upward, and then those commanders of the companies or platoons would then relay the information to the lower level subordinates. Question. You stated that the plan was given from the upper echelon, and the question is, what was the plan that you received? Response. When I received the order from the company and the platoon level, The plan was to gather an overall forces for the final attack on Phnom Penh and to gain victory. And for the final attack, it means all the forces has to be gathered as one, including those reserve forces at the rear, except some forces that needs to be readied for the wounded. Thank you. Immediately prior to the attack on Phnom Penh, which direction was you responsible for, and who was your immediate supervisor or superior? Response: I was assigned to be responsible for Onlung Krongan location under the command of Jim, who was the chief of the platoon. And then the platoons were under the commands of companies. Question regarding the plan to attack Phnom Penh, and in your units together with the platoon and the company commanders, were you responsible for the shelling into Phnom Penh? Response: I was a front battlefield combatant, that is, I engaged in personal attack, one-on-one fighting. I did not know about the shelling by the artillery unit. Question regarding the military equipment, logistics, and the food supply. Who were in charge? Response: regarding food supply and logistics, I did not have that knowledge. I only knew when they were delivered through my group, but I did not know who actually authorized for the delivery from the upper echelon. President, Council for Civil Parties, you have spent 25 minutes already, and your questions are further from the facts before this chamber today. Please try to redirect your questions so that you can gain the facts and make it more effective. You are reminded that you will not be granted additional time beyond the 1 hour time allocation. Council for Civil Party. Question: during the attack on Phnom Penh, after you gained the victory on Phnom Penh, which spearhead or direction were you responsible for, that is, after the victory? Response: after the victory in Phnom Penh, I received my order from the company level to be responsible for a stretch of road from Wat Phnom to Chroi Chongwa Bridge, and there were 3 platoons in charge of that stretch of road, and we were also responsible for guarding day and night, and we saw nobody else except the company and the platoon commanders and soldiers in those military structures present. Question: when you search and force people to leave Phnom Penh, what kinds of events did you observe or witness? Did the former soldiers or the civilians protest against such order? Response: immediately after the victory, both the civilians and in Phnom Penh and the soldiers, they were kind of confused. So initially I did not go up into the houses. However, there was announcement by mobile loudspeakers for people to go down from the upper floors and that they had to leave. And later on, after the situation became a bit more calmed, there were still remaining soldiers and civilians on the upper floors of some concrete houses, and some of the soldiers or the former soldiers threw grenades onto the Khmer Rouge soldiers. So there were sporadic clashes here and there. Thank you. Question. Yesterday you confirmed that you were in charge of the spearhead to make a final cleansing so that all the civilians had to completely leave the city. Can you tell us how long did it take for the city to be completely evacuated? Response. During the chaotic situation, it means there were a lot of civilians on the road during the first 3 days, and then it became a little bit less in a week's time, and it became even more less in 2 weeks' time, and by 1 month later there were only pockets of remaining soldiers or civilians on the upper floors of various concrete houses. Thank you. Question. After all the people had evacuated from Phnom Penh, what event did you observe? Response. I did not go around in Phnom Penh. I only positioned myself in the location where I was assigned to monitor. So what we did was to clear the roads, to clean up the houses, but we could only do that based on the instructions.
Question. During the time when you had to clean the roads, have you noted that the roads were littered with dead bodies in your location? Response. During the course of cleaning the roads in Phnom Penh, I did not see corpses. I only saw dead bodies on the roads leading to Phnom Penh during the fierce fighting. But when I was tasked with cleaning the roads in Phnom Penh, I never saw any dead body again. Question. When you were in Phnom Penh, had you ever seen any senior leaders of the Khmer Rouge coming to the city? Response. No, I hadn't known any of the leaders, but there were orders for us to protect the senior leaders and the diplomats, for example, Korean and Cuban diplomats, and we were tasked with giving protection to them, but I did not know at what level or at the ranks of those senior leaders. Question. I would like to go back a little bit. You indicated that you were in charge of some spearheads in Tulkok, Kilo number 6, and Prek Pno. During the evacuation, did you note notice any diplomats being evacuated as well? Response. Within my blocks under our control in Kilo number 6, these blocks were managed by the division from the north, but my small role was only to conquer or to control the very confined block where we had to manage. Question. Were you aware at that time that the French embassy was within the vicinity of your controlled block? Response. At the Wat Phnom vicinity, it was under the control of a company, and a company controlled 3 platoons, and each platoon had different duties, and I do not know whether where the French embassy could have been, but the Cuban embassy was to the north of the Wat Phnom location. Question. You talked about Cuban and the embassies of Korea and Cuba. Have you noted any chaotic situations happen at those embassies? Response. During that period of time, the situation was quiet. Indeed, there were cars on some roads, but on some other roads it was quiet, and the people had different roles from the upper echelon to control different locations separately. Question. I may also seek your clarification on the evacuation. With regard to the people, the civilians who had to be evacuated, can you tell the court, please, to which direction these civilians would be evacuated and who were in charge of each spearheads? Response. During the course of the evacuation, I had no idea where people would be sent to, because I was a soldier and I was in charge of making sure that the people were wiped out of the city or were taken out of the city. Question. Did you notice any appeals, for example, that made by the Khmer Rouge to bring back some officials who would be needed to rebuild the country? Have you ever noticed such plan or policy? Response. I had not been aware of these, and we never saw them back. Question. Mr. Witness, in your capacity as a soldier, can you tell the chamber, please, who were your superiors? And apart from your superiors, were you aware of any other senior leaders? Response. I have heard of their names, but I never met them in persons. I heard about or of their names in Phnom, in the forest. When I came to Phnom Penh, I heard of Mr. Kyusampon as a leader. Thank you. The next question. Yesterday, you testified that you were a security prison guard near Wat Phnom. Can you please be more precise where the prison could have been located? Response. This prison was located to the east of to the southeast of Wat Phnom. Question, but where is it now then? Response. I don't know, but if I am taken there, I am able to locate the location for you. But I don't remember the name of the location. Question, is it to the east of the current railway station? Response. No, it is not near the train station because it is to the southeast of Wat Phnom, so it's not near the railway station. Thank you. When you worked as the guard for the prison, did you observe any senior leaders visiting the prison? Response. I did not see any superiors other than the chief of the company and platoon. Perhaps there could have been other senior leaders or leaders coming to the prison to conduct interrogation, but I don't know. Council mic is not activated. The President, Council, could you please make sure your mic is activated before you put question? Question. So after Eun, Song and Po had been arrested, who were their successors? Response. At the same time when Eun and my other superiors were removed, I also was removed and transferred to Kampong Chnang. Question. Who came to take over from you superiors? Response. I was disconnected when I was transferred to Kampong Chnang and I don't know anything about this. Thank you. Question. Who sent you to Kampong Chnang? Response. I do not know who sent us, but I believe that they must be the chiefs of the company or platoons who would be in charge of sending us to work at the airfield in Kampong Chnang. Question. As a prison guard, did you observe any prisoner escaping from the prison? Response. There was no such incidents. However, as the guards, we were instructed to shoot any prisoner who escaped. And if we failed to shoot or arrest the prisoner who would be escaping, then we ourselves had to be jailed instead of the escapees. Counsel, thank you, Mr. Witness. Due to time constraints, I would like to conclude the questioning now, and I would like to cede the floor to my colleague. The President, Counsel for the Civil Party, you may proceed, but you have 20 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, everyone in and outside of the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Kong Kim. My name is Peini Ye. I am one of the international civil party lawyers, and I would like to ask you a few questions on the period after the fall of Phnom Penh. You said yesterday that after the fall of Phnom Penh, you became a squad leader. And my question is, as a squad leader, did you have to make reports on the activities of your squad?
Response. After Phnom Penh had been evacuated, I was in charge of the squad of 12 combatants, and I had to make a regular report, but the report was not regular anyway because we had little to report, and we only stood guard to protect ourselves from the attack of the enemies. And there was not much work. We only guarded, and there was no busy schedule. For example, there was no such visit of leaders to the city to keep us busy with anyway.
And when you were searching for remaining people in Phnom Penh, did you have to make reports on this?
Response. Of course, after checking the remaining people, and if we noted that people remain and we were at the location, then we had to make a report to the head of the platoon or company. But I rarely met these chiefs of the institutions.
And did you know, or do you know, what the head of the company or the platoon that you report to do, what did they do with these reports?
Response. The head of the company is by the person by the name of Rain, and Pon was in charge of the platoon, and Jim as well.
And what did these people do when you reported on the people left in Phnom Penh?
Response. I am afraid I cannot get your question. Please repeat it.
When you reported to Ren and Bon about your activities of the squad, how did they react and what did they tell you?
Response. we received orders to clean the area under our charge. If we noted that the people remained, indeed people who brought down from their apartments had to be sent to the company, and they would take them from there, but we don't know what happened next. At that time, again, as I already indicated, for a company there were 3 platoons, and the platoons also classified into squads, and I was in charge of a squad, and I only was supposed to understand my duties in the squad, and I would not be able to understand what happened to the other squads and even the platoon and the company.
Do you know then if other units also reported like you did?
Response: I don't know. I know what happened to the platoon, and there were meetings in the platoon, so I never joined meetings at the company level, so I don't know much about what happened in the company, because we were tasked with the functions that we received from meetings when the platoon met.
And during the meetings with the platoon, all the 3 squads attended these meetings. Is that correct?
Response: upon having received instruction from the company, the platoon would convene a joint meetings where squads member would be attending, and the items or the agenda of the meeting would be about strengthening our force, the group, to guard and clean and evacuate the remaining civilians.
You said yesterday that your platoon leader told you that the orders to clean Phnom Penh came from the division. Did he tell you that during these meetings?
Response: I heard of this person by the name Un from Division 310 who rendered orders all the way from division and then to the company and platoon and to the squad, and I received such order from this level channel of communication.
And do you know where Un, the commander of the division, received his orders from?
But
Response: I don't know, because I was of a very small rank, low rank, and we did not enjoy freedom of movement. Wherever we located, we would remain there for the entire period.
Now, yesterday you said that when, after the fall of Phnom Penh, your division arrived in the city, you belonged to the center. Which unit did you belong to before that?
Response: the military was classified into zone military. For example, the North Zone military would be covering Kampong Cham and other two provinces. And altogether, soldier belong to the center, or what we call the central soldier.
What was the difference between belonging to the center and belonging to one of the zones?
Response. At that time, there were soldiers for sector who attacked the provinces, and also the soldiers who had to attack Phnom Penh. But the soldiers who were reintegrated from the zone, then they combined to form the soldiers for the center to attack Phnom Penh.
And when you became the soldiers for the center, did that change your task or the chain of command or the personnel?
Response. At that time, the soldiers remained in the unit. In particular, those who had to attack Phnom Penh would have to remain in the unit even after Phnom Penh was liberated. There were no new recruitment.
Now, my last question is a follow-up question on what you have said this morning. You said that you were clearing the houses. What did you exactly do when you were clearing the houses?
Response. This morning I said I was tasked with clearing the houses or the roads. It is more about making the roads clean. And we only were supposed to work according to the designated block or area to make sure that the roads were clean to receive some visiting guests.
Do I understand it correctly that you did not clear the houses inside?
Response. Well, we were tasked with cleaning the roads only. We were not allowed to go into houses. Indeed, we would be allowed to go into the apartment where we were allowed to stay in, but not into other apartments.
Thank you, Mr. Kong Kim. I have no further questions. I wish you a safe journey back. Thank you very much.
The President. Thank you, Counsel. I would like to know if judges of the bench wish to put questions to the witness. Judge Lavergne, you may now proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I have a few questions to put to the witness. Good morning, Mr. Kong King. I am Judge Lavergne, and I would like to put a few follow-up questions to you. First of all, you explained to us that before you entered Phnom Penh, you had been a messenger and then a soldier. And I'd like to know if, in the context of these activities, that is to say, before the capture of Phnom Penh, you participated or you were aware of the capture of other cities. For example, were you aware of the capture of Karachi or Udong or other cities before the fall of Phnom Penh?
Response. I was not able to know what happened at other targets because we were obliged to concentrate and know only on the target we were attacking, in this case, Phnom Penh.
You explained to us that you were not aware of an evacuation plan of Phnom Penh before the capture of Phnom Penh. But can you tell us that this order came immediately after the capture of Phnom Penh? And if this was the case, were you given any kind of explanations of why evacuations were taking place?
Response. When attacking Phnom Penh, during the fierce fighting, we were not able to receive any further plan or other plans, including the evacuation of the population, and we did not receive such order. The orders we received were mainly to attack Phnom Penh, the target area, and that we would be guided and instructed to go to the confined direction that we supposed to attack. Then, when I approached Phnom Penh, I noted that people were on the move already.
Vous, personnellement,
when were you in particular aware of an order for the evacuation of Phnom Penh? Did you get to know about it when you saw people leaving, or an order was effectively issued to you for the evacuation of Phnom Penh?
Response. I started to know that people had been evacuated when I was stationed at the target area, and when we were asked to carry out the evacuation plan in our target area.
And at that point in time, you, as a soldier, were you told why that evacuation had to take place?
Regarding the plan to evacuate the people, I did not know about the plan in advance. And later on, there was evacuation of people from Phnom Penh, but I did not know the intention of the upper echelon for such evacuation.
Vous avez déjà dit
You stated earlier that you observed that messages were announced using loudspeakers to members of the population, asking them to leave Phnom Penh. Can you tell us what was the nature of the messages, and who were the people in particular who had to leave, and who owned the equipment that had to be used for disseminating the messages? Was the equipment from the division or from another unit?
At that time, I did not get a full understanding of the message regarding the evacuation of a people. However, there were other mobile units. As for my squad, we stationed in one place. And those mobile units, they were on mobiles. They made announcements for people in Phnom Penh to prepare themselves for the evacuation. At that time, immediately after the fall of Phnom Penh, the situation was confusing and chaotic. There were remaining former soldiers who clashed with the Khmer Rouge soldiers, and there was those civilians living on the upper floors of the apartments.
Mais est-ce que vous avez entendu les messages?
But did you hear the messages that were announced? And what was said specifically?
I did not get the full message. However, I can recall that the announcement was to invite the Phnom Penh residents to leave the city temporarily so that they can prepare the city, and that was what I can recall.
Donc vous avez dit qu'il y avait des unités.
You have stated that there were mobile units scouring the town that were in charge of disseminating the messages. Were those mobile units part of the divisions, or they were under other military authorities? What equipment were they using? Were the loudspeakers the property of the division or any other military entities?
I did not have that knowledge. As I said, I was at a lower level, and I did not know about the arrangement at the upper level. My duty was to defend the location where I was assigned to station, and I did not cross in through other parameters. And what you said was the decision or the arrangement of the upper echelon.
Est-ce que vous pouvez simplement me dire si dans...
Could you please simply tell me whether in your division you had the kind of equipment used for informing the people? Did you have loudspeakers in your division?
In my squad, no, there was no loudspeaker. Only the mobile units, they had their vehicle and they had their loudspeakers for that announcement.
Alors, je voudrais revenir.
I would like us to go back to the description of the zone which was under the control of your division, including Phnom Penh. I have understood that at a point in time, Phnom Penh town was divided into different zones, and some divisions were in charge of one zone or the other. And I take it that your division was in charge of the north zone of Phnom Penh. Is that correct?
My division prior to the fall of Phnom Penh was responsible for the area between Prai Kadam to Phnom Penh, and after the fall of Phnom Penh, I was assigned to charge of the section from Wat Phnom to the north. And as for Division 310, they also stationed to the north of Wat Phnom.
Donc, cette partie au nord,
So that part in the north of Wat Nam was ran along Tonle Slap and then went to Chanvar and up to Tulkok and right to the railway station. Did it go as far as the Norodom Boulevard? How far did it go?
Regarding the locations under the control of that division, I did not gain that full knowledge. But in the vicinity of Wat Phnom, it was within the parameter of my division through the west of the river bank. As for the areas in Tulkok, it was also part of the parameter under the control of my division.
alors, il y a
Now, I suppose that there were a number of public buildings in that zone which was under your division's control. Let us take, for instance, the National Bank. Was it part of the zone under your control? And do you know what happened to the National Bank after the capture of Phnom Penh?
When we entered Phnom Penh, I did not know where the National Bank was located. As I stated earlier, wherever I was assigned to take charge of, I would only walk within that perimeter. I did not cross that perimeter through other areas under other people's control. So 24 hours, 24 on 24, I would only station within my assigned parameter.
donc, monsieur le témoin,
Mr. Witness, throughout the time you spent in Phnom Penh, you never passed in front of any premises and were told that the National Bank was located in those premises?
Although that area was within my division control, I only moved within my assigned parameter. As I was in charge of my squad and it was rather limited, I made movement only within that limited parameter, and I did not have the knowledge or the full control of the parameters of that division.
monsieur le témoin,
Mr. Witness, apart from the National Bank of Cambodia, in principle, there were other public buildings under your division. There were, for instance, hospitals. Can you tell us the names of the hospitals that were under your division?
I did not know which hospital was under my division. However, there was the Prakatamili Hospital, which was within my squad's parameter.
alors on va parler au moins de cet hôpital.
Now, let us talk about that particular hospital. You went to Ketmili Hospital. Among the general orders issued by superiors for the evacuation of Phnom Penh, did those orders also apply to Ketmili Hospital?
During the evacuation, I did not know what happened inside that hospital. only after the conclusion of the evacuation and the hospital was cleaned up, and my soldiers who had been wounded were transferred to that hospital for further treatment.
Qu'est-ce que vous entendez par
What do you mean when you say that the hospital was cleaned? What do you mean by that?
After the fall of Phnom Penh and after the chaotic situation as I described earlier, I did not know whether the people inside the hospital had been evacuated or how the arrangement was made. Only later, other people went to clean the hospital, and after the hospital was cleaned, then those soldiers who had been wounded were sent for treatment in that hospital, and then there were military medics who also came to that hospital to provide treatments to the wounded soldiers.
Est-ce qu'il y a eu des civils qui ont été soignés dans cet hôpital?
Were any civilians treated at that hospital?
After the liberation, there was no civilian being treated at that hospital. Only the soldiers who participated in the attack on Phnom Penh and who had been wounded were treated in that hospital. There was no civilian.
Est-ce que la division 310 a été chargée?
Was Division 310 in charge of ascertaining whether other public buildings had to be cleaned? For instance, buildings that had housed ministries previously, or the post office and the railway station. Were there any operations carried out with a view to ascertaining whether those buildings had been rid of their inhabitants?
Upon entry into Phnom Penh, I myself did not know which building was what. I was quite young and I never entered the Phnom Penh before. And when I entered Phnom Penh, I was not authorized to walk around and to be familiar with the various iconic locations of buildings. I stationed within my perimeter day and night. So even after the liberation, I was not allowed to wander freely inside the city.
Alors, on en a déjà un petit peu.
Now, we have already talked about it somewhat, but in your zone, in 310, there were also embassies. A while ago, you talked about Korean diplomats and Cuban diplomats. It may well be that I did not understand what you stated, but I thought I understood that your division was in charge of protecting Cuban and Korean diplomats. Is that indeed what you stated?
Within the parameter of the control of my division, regarding the Korean embassy and the Cuban embassy, these two embassies were within the parameter of my squad. It means they were under the protection or the guard of my squad. They were to the north of Wat Phnom, but my duty was to protect those embassies at the outside parameter or outside compound of the embassies. I did not enter the embassy.
Est-ce que ces ambassades étaient...
Did they remove all those living in those embassies, or there were still diplomats in those embassies? Had some people sought refuge in those embassies?
During the fall of Phnom Penh, I did not know whether there were still people living inside the embassies. What I knew was that after Phnom Penh had been liberated and after the streets had been cleaned up, the diplomatic representatives had set up in Phnom Penh, but they were not the former diplomatic representatives.
Est-ce que, au cours de votre...
In the course of carrying out your duties as part of controlling specific sectors, were you in charge of controlling foreigners? Did you receive any particular instructions concerning foreigners? Did you have to direct those people to specific locations, or were there any people in the division who were specifically tasked with controlling such persons?
I myself did not know about the foreigners. I only focused on my assigned duties within my parameter. I never saw any foreigner.
Est-ce que vous connaissez quelqu'un qui s'appelle...
Did you know someone by the name Nem who occupied certain positions in Division 310? The name was Nem.
In that division, I did not know many of the senior commanders. I knew Ta-eun. Ta-eun was the overall commander, and I knew him through the platoon and company commanders, but I was not close to him, and I did not know who were his deputy commanders.
Est-ce que...
Mr. Kong Kim, were you able to listen to the radio when you were about to attack Phnom Penh, or when you were in Phnom Penh? Did you listen to the radio?
Before we entered Phnom Penh and during the time that we entered Phnom Penh, I did not listen to the radio. I received direct orders from my superior.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu...
Did you at any point in time hear of a list of 7 super traitors who had to be eliminated?
No, I did not hear that, and I did not know about that.
Et les noms de Sirit Matak,
Names like Sirik Matat, Long Boret, Unbun Hawk mean anything to you?
I did not hear those names.
vous avez indiqué que
You stated that you participated in the cleaning up of streets to pave the way for the reception of important delegations that came to visit Phnom Penh. Did you yourself participate in the reception of those delegations? Were you asked to play any role? Were you a member of the public? Were you in the Guard Corps? What was your role vis-à-vis those visitors?
As for receiving guests, my responsibility was in charge of the security within my assigned parameter for those guests. But I did not accompany guests when those guests went for a meeting or went for a visit somewhere. I would only provide the security to them within my parameter.
Est-ce que vous avez entendu parler de l'hôtel royal?
Did you ever hear anyone talk of the Royal Hotel? Were any delegations received in the Royal Hotel? Was it in your sector?
I did not know that hotel. I didn't know where that hotel was located. However, to the west of Wat Phnom and to the north of the garden, there were big hotels there.
Est-ce que lorsque ces délégations de visite
And when those delegations of visitors came to visit Phnom Penh, were some soldiers asked to dress in civilian attire? And if yes, why?
When delegation or visitors crossing my sector, our soldiers still dressed in our uniform, providing the protection. There were other people who were like textile workers. They would dress in civilian clothes to greet those delegations or visitors.
Est-ce que vous vous souvenez d'une organisation?
Do you recall whether any particular arrangements were made for particularly important events? Do you remember a visit by important delegations, a Chinese delegation, a Korean delegation?
I was not familiar with such an arrangement. At that time, soldiers were not allowed to know about all of that. We only implemented the duties assigned to us at the location where we were stationed. If we made a mistake, rather than a soldier, we would be considered an enemy. So as a soldier, we strictly adhere to the disciplines and the orders.
Est-ce que, par exemple, on vous a...
Were you, for instance, informed of the possibility that Prince Norodom Sihanouk would return to Phnom Penh?
No, I was not aware of that. I did not have the right to know about that major events or arrangement.
Donc, pendant tout le temps où vous...
So, throughout the time you spent in Phnom Penh, you never knew whether Prince Norodom Sihanouk was in Phnom Penh or not.
I stayed in Phnom Penh shortly after the liberation, and during that short stay, I did not know about that. Even when I was transferred to work in Kampong Chhnang, I did not know about the status of Prince Sihanouk.
Monsieur le témoin,
Mr. Witness, you stated that you participated in keeping watch over prisoners. You made the distinction between the types of prisoners kept in that prison. I am particularly interested in the prisoners you saw at the very beginning. You talked of people who are ordinary. You talked of prisoners who are officials or politicians in democratic Cambodia. Regarding the ordinary prisoners, who were they?
While I were watching prisoners, I did not know about the classification whether some prisoners were considered the political prisoners. To me, they were all prisoners. So when prisoners were brought in, the building that housed the prisoners were two-story buildings. There were beds inside the cell. And as for the underground housing of prisoners, they were to house those soldiers who violated the disciplines.
est-ce que vous savez si
Do you know whether among the prisoners, at least at the beginning, former officers or former civil servants from the Long Nol regime?
While I were guarding the prisoners, what I knew was that they were not related to the former regime. They were those who arrested by the Angka, and they were former workers of the Angka.
How did you know that? How did you know that there was no one tied to the former regime? That the prisoners were only prisoners from the Angkar? Was this something that you were told? Or was this something that you noticed yourself? Were you able to ask questions to the prisoners?
Response. As a guard, I had the right to guard and look at the prisoners. I did not have a chance or were not allowed to ask each of the prisoner in person. However, I heard over the interrogation, for example, where they were arrested and sent from each zone, for example.
And without going into the detail of what you might have heard, can you tell us what these people were accused of?
Response. I did not understand in detail what could have been the motive behind their arrest. I heard briefly when interrogation took place, but they were tortured, and I saw this. but I don't know what kind of wrongdoings or mistakes they committed before they had been arrested.
Now let's go back a little bit and let's speak about the cleansing of the city. Did you ever hear about or did you receive any directions regarding what is called the war booty? What we could call the war booty. Did you receive any specific directions regarding war booty?
Response. I was never aware of this or any instruction concerning this.
And the people who were obliged to leave Phnom Penh, were they searched? And if these people were searched, were there certain objects that had to be confiscated?
Response. What I saw and what I heard from others when people being evacuated, some items would be seized. For example, weapons. But their money and other properties would remain with them.
And were there certain objects or food in the houses that had to be sent to certain storage houses? Were certain directions given regarding this?
Response. The food or the collection of other items was not to my knowledge. I did not know anything about this. The soldiers who came to Phnom Penh did not come to own anything collected in Phnom Penh. We came with a sack of clothes like military equipment, and that's all. And in our group, we had very few members, and we did not know much about how these things would be managed.
I was not speaking about seizing by military personnel. I was speaking about a certain kind of organization organized to store goods for Angkar. Was this organized in any fashion or not?
Response. I'm afraid I do not know, or I was never instructed to deal with these goods.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. I have no further questions to put to you.
The President. Thank you, Judge Laviange, and thank you, Mr. Witness. It is now appropriate moment for the adjournment. The chamber will adjourn for until 11 o'clock. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness and his jury counsel during the adjournment and have him return to the courtroom when the next session resumes. The court is adjourned.
សូមអញ្ជើញក្រោកឈរ